a lot of people because they was going to give him the chair. So he said, F that. You know, this is what I hear.
What?
You know, all the time, bro. Alpo's the type of dude doing his wheelies. He would kick the police car. Be on the side of the police, kick the police car so they could chase him.
This notorious drug lord, Alpo Martinez, shot on the streets of Harlem. He was a larger-than-life figure who seemed to defy death. Fox 5's Lisa Evers goes over who he was and why he might have had a long list of enemies.
If you've seen Paid in Full, then you already know about Alpo Martinez, or at least you think you do. But press pause. What if the movie only gave you a glimpse of the truth and left out the rawest, most unfiltered parts of his story?
I wasn't surprised. I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. You know what I mean? Because of the situation, it's like, come on, 14 people. You admitted 14 people.
In the film, the character that had everyone talking was Rico, the flashy, ruthless, and reckless drug dealer based on Alpo. He was violent, impulsive, and willing to do whatever it took to stay on top. But the real Alpo, he was all that and then more.
I had to get out the van to go help him. And when I went to go help him, Richard made a sound. So that shit startled me. Like, oh shit, he's still alive. So I grabbed the gun. I grabbed the gun from my little man and put one in his head.
What the fuck?
And then I had to pick him up. I had to pick him up and dump him.
But Alpo was a liar, man.
What?
Alpo was a liar. You know, he wasn't just a rat, he was a liar. We could dig into all of that, trust me. Everything he did was a robbery, man. It wasn't because somebody crossed him, somebody did this. Now, he robbed every person. It was just for money, man.
Alpo Martinez wasn't just a Harlem drug kingpin, as the movie depicted. He was a larger-than-life figure who made his own rules. He didn't just run the streets. He and his crew terrorized them. He wasn't just a hustler. He was a and when the pressure got too real, he didn't hesitate to snitch on his own people to save himself.
According to what I hear, he told on a lot of people.
Don't be an Alpo. What the hell, Alpo?
Because they was going to give him the chair. So he said, F that. You know, this is what I hear.
One of the biggest betrayals in the game was the murder of his close friend and business partner, Rich Porter.
He gave him the Alpo to take out of town. Alpo kills Rich.
Rich Porter get. Let me share this with you, bro. I remember the night. I remember Rich, his leg was shaking like he wasn't saying nothing. Like, what the fuck is going on? I hung up, called Pat, which was Rich's sister. She crying, right? I was like, I heard. And she was like, yo, it's bitch. I was like, what?
Harlem had its own legendary trio, Richard Money Rich Porter, Ozzy Faison, and Alpo Martinez doing the most, cashing out in the game. But somewhere along the way, things took a dark turn. Greed, power, and paranoia crept in. Suddenly, loyalty didn't mean what it used to, and one of them wasn't making it out alive. Alpo Martinez became one of the most infamous names in the world of organized crime, and even in hip-hop culture, but everything still caught up to him. Let's dive in. Alpo's story started in Spanish Harlem, where he was born on June 8th, 1966. Growing up in a Puerto Rican family, he spoke Spanish fluently, something that would later help him in the drug game. As a kid, he was well liked by family and friends, and every summer he'd stay with a white family through the Fresh Air Fund program. He got along great with them, but when he came back to Harlem, life was different. The neighborhood was changing fast. More drugs, more dealers, more money flowing through the streets. And Alpo, he wanted in. He started out robbing drug dealers, then worked as a runner, moving product from one place to another. Alpo and his crew were known for being bold and reckless, and that got him into trouble fast. His mother eventually sent him back to the Fresh Air Fund program in 1979, hoping to straighten him out. But by 1983, he was already catching the attention of the police for petty crimes. He didn't want to rely on his mom for money. He wanted his own cash, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get it. In 1985, while serving time for a weapons charge, he met Rich Porter.
He back involved.
Okay, so you're rocking with Rich. And does Alpo come in the picture right about now?
Alpo is in the picture when Rich is in prison.
When he got out, he was looking for a way to break into the drug trade and ended up crossing paths with Ozzy Faison. At first, AZ didn't trust him, but Rich spoke highly of Alpo, and that was enough to get him in.
Rich called me the next day. I said, yo, man, dude named Al. He said, yeah, it's my man. Look out for him. And then he said, okay, cool. I looked out for him.
Alpo always credited AZ for giving him a shot, but he wasn't just some small-time dealer. AZ used him as muscle, sending him to handle problems and make sure no one messed with their business.
So you're actually working with Alpo while Rich is still in prison?
Yeah, I'm giving him work, and he's like giving him an A for coke, and he taking it to the east side, and he doing what he do. Always paid me on time, never fucked up my money. He was a real dude, at that point.
As Alpo climbed the ranks, he took on bigger roles, overseeing shipments, handling stick-up kids who tried robbing AZ's spots, and managing his own corner. When AZ moved his operation, he gave Alpo a chance to set up shop on 145th Street, and while others hesitated, Alpo took it without question. By the mid-'80s, Rich was out of prison and running the streets, pulling in $40,000 to $50,000 a week.
So I know that was hard for him as well as anybody that loved him.
God damn.
And he got home and got right back into being Richard.
And Alpo loved the attention. He was always in the spotlight, like riding dirt bikes through Harlem, taunting cops and leading them on high-speed chases. Every summer, he and his crew would hit Myrtle Beach, showing off their cars and bikes like they were celebrities. He wasn't just a dealer, he was loud about it, doing things like crashing motorcycles one day and buying brand new ones the next. He'd blow thousands on fireworks just to put on a show.
My God.
He loved it, that attention, bro. You feel me? He loved it, that shit, bro. He just loved it.
No,
wherever
Alpo,
he go, he gotta let it be known. Alpo's here. Alpo's in the building.
In the drug world, the key to survival is staying under the radar, and that was something Rich Porter understood. Rich kept a low profile, avoided unnecessary drama, and made sure to keep his moves quiet. Alpo couldn't care less, and that difference in mindset started causing cracks between them. The first one to really feel the heat was AZ. He got ambushed, shot 9 times, twice in the head, but somehow survived.
What
I
the
got
fuck?
shot. This is real. My spirit left the body, man. And I guess I got shot 9 times, twice in the head.
You got shot 9 times?
9 times, twice in the head, 1 in the neck, 1 in the shoulder, and the rest was in the leg. My leg got broke from the gunshot wounds.
After that, he decided to get out of the game completely.
After Rich, man, I pull out, but you hear the stories. You hear all the crazy shit, and it just makes you wonder why.
Alpo, on the other hand, saw an opening in Washington, D.C. When a major dealer, Rayful Edmonds, got locked up, Alpo swooped in and took over the market. D.C. was a gold mine for him. He was making crazy money, literally stuffing duffel bags full of cash and hauling them back to New York. Despite the risk, he and Rich Porter were still doing business together, sharing suppliers and moving product. Alpo was quick on his feet. He could buy a kilo of New York for $8,000, flip it in DC for an easy $3,000 profit, and all it took was a 5-hour drive. Just like Rich, he had serious connections and a never-ending stream of cash. But then Alpo switched things up. Instead of hustling small amounts on the street, he started moving wholesale, selling kilos to Rich's old customers. That's when things got messy. Rich allegedly started overcharging Alpo by $3,000 to $5,000 per kilo, which when you're buying 100 to 200 kilos at a time, adds up fast. And when that kind of money is involved, friendships don't last long. This is where things really started falling apart. Alpo and Rich had always made money together, but now Alpo was convinced that Rich was lying about his supplier and overcharging him. Suddenly, all the money they'd made, all the history they had, it didn't mean a thing.
Rich, where did you get that coat from, man? That shit was good, because I wanted to make him comfortable. That shit was good as a motherfucker. He's like, I got it from my connect. I said, oh, yeah? So from there, I knew he was lying.
And you killed this man?
I turned to my little man. I gave him the nod. Once I gave him the nod, my little man spent, because he was short so he could stand up in the van. Next thing you heard was the 2 gunshots. Bang, bang. Richard slumped over. It happened right here. It happened right here.
What? And he tell
At this light. At this light, it happened. I had to get out the van to go help him. And when I went to go help him, Richard made a sound. So that shit startled me. Like, oh shit, he's still alive. I grabbed the gun from my little man and put one in his head.
What the fuck?
And then I had to pick him up. And dump him.
When Rich was already going to be big news, shaking up Harlem's drug scene, but the fact that he was taken out by Alpo, a guy everyone saw as his brother.
Does Alpo officially get connected to Rich Porter's murder?
He admits to it.
He admits to it.
Yes, sir.
So he said Rich Porter.
He admits to that.
Did that just send shockwaves through Harlem? Or did people already
I'm gonna put it like this. You see Scarface?
Yeah.
That sent the shockwave through Harlem and through people like, why you do that? You feel me? Because they was like that. It's like we was on a stage and the people looking at this performance, how do you, man, that's how it was. Like, oh, baby. That's how that was.
Alpo later described that night, how he met up with Rich, how Rich got into the van, and how Alpo locked the doors. He acted like everything was cool, even making small talk about the quality of the drugs. But deep down he was furious. He just couldn't accept what he thought was betrayal. And in the end, he did the unthinkable.
And he called, and I told him,
Alpo,
and I asked him, like, yo, why, man? And he was like, yo, man, nigga Rich lied, man, about Connect, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. But Rich gave him the birds at a certain price, and he should have gave it to him at a different price. This is the reason why he did that. Rich fucked him out about $200,000 or $300,000, you know, whatever.
With that, Harlem lost one of its kings. AZ had already walked away from the game after surviving 2 bullets to the head. Rich was gone, and the last man standing was Alpo. After Rich's murder, Alpo knew he had to get out of New York. His name was getting too hot, so he relocated to Washington, D.C. permanently.
After he was in Harlem, he went out to D.C. doing what he do, whatever. A lot of people lost their lives. Just laying down a lot of people.
But if he thought Harlem was rough, DC was on a whole different level. In the early 90s, the city was drowning in crime. It was literally called the capital of the US because of how many people were getting, especially in black neighborhoods. Drug wars turned the streets into war zones, and shootouts were happening almost every night. At that time, one of the most feared names in DC was Wayne Silk Perry. By the time he was just 12 years old in 1974, he had allegedly already committed his first. That was just the beginning. As a teenager, he sold drugs and then escalated to robbing banks. But his criminal career came at a cost. During one of the bank jobs, his little brother was killed by police. That didn't slow Wayne down though. He became a master at evading capture, earning a reputation as someone who could always slip away. In 1984, he got caught in a shootout with rivals, but when he was arrested, the jury actually believed he was defending himself and found him not guilty. He ended up at Lorton Reformatory Youth Center, but was back on the streets by 1987. Broke but determined, Wayne put together a new crew and became one of the most feared hitmen in the city. He had a way of keeping people off guard, acting like a clown one moment and pulling the trigger the next. He'd rob drug dealers for their money, jewelry, and drugs, then share the spoils with his crew. Meanwhile, Alpo was making his move in DC, learning the streets, making connections, and raking in millions. But his success made him a target.
I was out in DC selling drugs.
People wanted a cut, and some even tried to extort him. One of the biggest threats was Michael Frey Salters, the so-called godfather of DC. Frey had a solid reputation, and many believed he was the next king of the city's drug trade, but Alpo wasn't about to let that happen. He wasn't looking to play second to anyone. While all this was going down, Wayne Perry was back behind bars on an attempted murder charge with a $10,000 bail. A lot of people in DC were relieved. Having Wayne off the streets meant one less threat to worry about, but that wasn't gonna last. A call from Sheldon Shorty Pop Watkins, a leader of the Junkyard Band, changed everything, and just like that, the streets were about to get even bloodier. Shorty Pop had ties to Wayne Perry and was determined to get him out of jail. He knew Alpo was looking for muscle, someone who could watch his back, and figured this was the perfect opportunity. So he made Alpo an offer, pay Wayne's bail, and in return, he'd have the most feared enforcer in DC on his side. Alpo saw the value in this and didn't hesitate to cover the bail. Getting Wayne out was just the first step. Alpo knew that with Wayne by his side, he'd have even more control over the streets. Once Wayne was free, the two became close, working together as a powerful duo. But not everyone was happy about it. A lot of people feared Wayne and would have preferred for him to stay locked up. He had a reputation for being ruthless, and his presence only made Alpo more dangerous. Wayne, however, was loyal. He respected Alpo for helping him, even though he wasn't involved in handling drugs or money. His role was simple but crucial. Make sure no one disrespected Alpo or tried to take him down. Alpo, on the other hand, was smart enough to keep Wayne out of his financial dealings. The less Wayne knew about the drug operations, the better. That way there was no reason for betrayal. Wayne was taken care of, and that was all that mattered. Despite their criminal empire, Alpo and Wayne weren't just about business. They also enjoyed the perks that came with their power. They had women, threw wild parties just blocks from the White House, and lived like kings. But while they were celebrating, enemies were closing in. One of those enemies was Michael Frey Salters, who saw Alpo as a threat and wanted him dead. Alpo and Wayne weren't about to let that happen. So on July 16, 1991, they struck first. Wayne shot Frey, who died the next morning.
On July 16, 1991, Michael Frey Salters was ambushed in his car at 1st and Bryant Streets in Northwest D.C.
What the fuck?
His car had been riddled with bullets. Frey had been shot at...
But the hit only brought more heat from law enforcement. Frey's put Alpo under an even bigger microscope, and the authorities started digging deeper into his empire. That's when Nathaniel Peanut Watkins, Rich Porter's cousin, came forward with damning information. He told police that Alpo was the mastermind behind major drug deals, even recalling how he once saw Alpo hand over $300,000 to a dealer sending cash to New York. The feds were already on Alpo's trail, but now they had even more reasons to go after him. While the cops were putting the pieces together, Alpo was still out in the streets doing dirt. One of his most infamous crimes came after a falling out with a Brooklyn drug dealer named Demencio Montana Benson. Montana had built a strong reputation, especially in D.C., where he was well respected for treating locals fairly. But respect meant nothing once he crossed Alpo. Montana had been secretly seeing Alpo's wife, and for a while Alpo didn't know. But when his wife confessed that Montana had put hands on her, slapping her in the face, Alpo saw it as more than just personal. It was about power, about reputation. He couldn't let it slide. With Wayne Perry by his side, Alpo planned his revenge. Not long after, Montana was ambushed in broad daylight after a basketball game. A single shot to the face made sure he'd never cross Alpo again. But the hit only added to the mountain of evidence stacking up against Alpo. By now, law enforcement knew they weren't dealing with just any street-level dealer. Alpo was a kingpin and a major player in the underworld. The list of crimes tied to his name kept growing, but no one knew for sure just how many bodies he left behind. Now, nearly 2 years after he had Rich Porter taken out, the empire Alpo built started to crumble. His world was about to come crashing down. For most people, November 7th, 1991 is remembered as the day Magic Johnson shocked the world by announcing his retirement from the NBA after testing positive for HIV. But for Alpo Martinez, that day marked the end of his reign. After a year-long FBI manhunt, one of the most infamous drug dealers in America was finally in handcuffs. At just 25 years old, he was arrested in Southeast Washington, his empire crumbling around him. The very next day, Alpo sat in a courtroom, listening as the charges against him were read out. The list was long and the weight of it was crushing. Authorities weren't just after him for drug dealing. They wanted answers about major Washington players like Michael Frey Salters, Timothy Brunell Cohen, and Mark Mullen.
So at what point does Alpo actually get arrested?
DC, he get locked up, I think in '93.
For what?
For bodies.
The latter two had been taken out in broad daylight at an Oxon Hill, Maryland car wash, a brazen act that only made law enforcement more determined to bring him down. As the courtroom buzzed with whispers and reporters scribbled notes, Alpo sat there, barely saying a word. The Washington Post later reported that his eyes welled up with tears and he sniffled loudly, overwhelmed by the reality of what was happening. And it wasn't just a long list of charges that hit him, it was what those charges meant. He was staring at 14 counts, including the execution of his former best friend Rich Porter and Porter's 12-year-old brother, William. The death penalty was a very real possibility. Alpo had spent years outrunning the law, dodging bullets and stacking millions, but now there was no escape. With everything closing in on him, he made a decision that would change his legacy forever. He decided to cooperate. He knew that his only chance of survival was to cut a deal, and the best way to do that was to give up one of the most feared men in DC, Wayne Perry. Wayne had been Alpo's muscle, his enforcer, the man who made sure no one disrespected him. But now Alpo was willing to trade Wayne's freedom for his own. His lawyers made it clear if he wanted to avoid death row, this was his only option. And so Alpo turned informant, providing the government with all the details they needed to put Wayne Perry away for good. Because of Alpo's testimony, Wayne Perry was sentenced to 5 life terms without the possibility of parole.
Hey, speaking of big time, based on Alpo's cooperation, Wayne Perry got 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Essentially, Wayne Perry is never getting out of prison.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
That's the sad thing about it, reality, yeah.
A man who once ruled the streets with an iron fist was now locked away forever, but cooperating came at a cost. In the world Alpo came from, snitching was the ultimate betrayal. The same people who once respected him, feared him, and made money with him now wanted nothing to do with him. He had broken the street code, and that meant he was no longer untouchable. Many of his former associates ended up behind bars because of what he told the feds. For Alpo Martinez, the game was over. He had gone from Harlem's flashiest drug kingpin to a government witness, a man whose name became synonymous with betrayal. And even though he had escaped death row, his story was far from over. Because in the streets, some things aren't forgiven, and some debts are paid in blood. Wayne Perry was one of the most feared names in DC, a man whose reputation as a hitman made him legendary in the streets. According to Lore and Legends author Eoin Williams, Perry was the most infamous enforcer to ever walk the nation's capital. But even the most feared men don't escape consequences forever. Wayne Perry's story took a different turn. After a life spent striking fear into the streets, he found himself locked away for good, facing a lifetime of nothing but time. And somewhere in that isolation, he found something else. Religion. He converted to Islam, and maybe it was a way to find peace. Maybe it was a way to make sense of everything he'd done. Or maybe it was just another way to survive in a world where the rules were different. Whatever the reason, he started speaking out, using his past as a warning instead of a weapon, trying to stop young kids from making the same choices that had led him there. Maybe he was looking for redemption. Maybe he was just trying to rewrite his legacy. Either way, the man who once ruled the streets of DC wasn't the same one sitting behind bars. Alpo Martinez, on the other hand, took a different route. In exchange for his testimony, he got a 35-year sentence and was eventually released into the Witness Protection Program in 2015. But even after stepping out of prison, he wasn't content with fading into the background. He wanted to reclaim his story on his terms. There were even rumors that Alpo was trying to break into Hollywood, with whispers that R&B icon Mary J. Blige might have been involved in helping him secure a movie deal. The Yonkers Times reported that Alpo was frustrated with others profiting off his name without his say-so, so he was determined to tell his own version of events. Allegedly, he got connected with celebrity stylist Misa Hilton Brim, a longtime friend of Blige. From there, talks supposedly began with Lionsgate, which was opening a new studio in Yonkers in 2022. Given that Lionsgate owns Power Books Outdoor, 2 on Stars, and that Yonkers is Blige's hometown, the whole thing didn't seem impossible. And according to street rumors, Alpo and Misa were even romantically involved before his death. On Halloween night, 2021, it all came crashing down. Alpo Martinez, once larger than life, was gunned down in his Ram truck on Frederick Douglass Boulevard in Harlem, the very streets where he built his empire, the same streets that once feared and respected him.
This notorious drug lord, Alpo Martinez, shot on the streets of Harlem. He was a larger-than-life figure who seemed to defy death. Fox 5's Lisa Evers goes over who he was and why he might have had a long list of enemies.
And in those final moments, as if scrambling for one last escape, he reportedly tossed drugs out of his car, like he could somehow erase the evidence, like he could undo everything that had led him to this point. But there was no running from fate, no talking his way out this time. The life he had built on money, power, and betrayal ended right where it all began. Alpo never really disappeared. Even after he was gone, his name stayed loud. The culture wouldn't let him fade, not with the way his story had been told and retold. turned into legend, turned into myth. Paid in Full made sure of that with Cameron's cold, ruthless take on Rico, keeping Alpo's legacy alive for a generation that wasn't even around when he was at his peak. Rappers kept his name in their verses, fans kept his story alive in their debates, and even his own son, Paparazzi Poe, was out trying to carve his own lane, dropping Brick Squad Monopoly just before his father's final chapter was written. In the end, Alpo's life was a mix of highs and lows, impossible to separate. He went from living the high life to a brutal end on the streets of Harlem where it all started. The game had a way of catching up with him. No matter how much you have of money, power, respect, the streets never forget, and they always collect. For Alpo.
Oh, Alpo, I didn't know you was out here doing all this, nigga.